Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, about a licensed survivor I've had on the back burner for a long time. As promised, A Nightmare on Elm Street's Quentin Smith. I say this as both a horror aficionado and a Dead by Daylight player. There's always been a lot of reasons that people have had for disliking Quentin. In the 2010 adaptation of Nightmare on Elm Street, Quentin Smith, played by Gallner, was a new character introduced to the movie, who had never been in any of the franchise's older movies. That movie was not well received critically or financially, and one of the commonly cited reasons why was that the new characters were not likeable. A lot of fans and critics argued that the old characters that got stripped out of the movie were replaced with people that we had no reason to particularly care about. And the few old characters that were kept, Nancy and Freddy himself, were pale imitations of their original incarnations. For example, the role of a romantic partner to Nancy in the original movie was given to Glenn Lance, played by a young Johnny Depp, who died in possibly the most memorable death in the entire franchise, the legendary tornado of blood scene. To many people, Quentin's meekness and lack of memorable death compared to Glenn make him feel like a hollow imitation of the original character, much like the movie as a whole came across to many like a hollow imitation of the original. And that perception of Quentin and the Nightmare on Elm Street chapter as playing second best to the original followed them into Dead by Daylight. That really wasn't helped by the chapter being arguably the worst in DBD's history, giving us a killer who had to be reworked twice and still isn't interesting, one of the most horrible maps ever designed by human hands, and Quentin even looked like a goblin who'd been dehydrated like a freeze-dried rat in a biology lab. His face has been fixed since then, but that's all Quentin received since the game's launch. No new cosmetics, no new stories, nothing. Many people said that the survivor for the chapter should have been Nancy Holbrook instead, as Freddy's favourite, one of the few characters directly adapted from the original movie, and the one he continues to menace during the cliffhanger at the end of the movie. It only makes sense that she should be there, right? But I want to defend the red-headed stepchild of the DBD licensed survivor lineup for a second. Today, I shall press the case that Quentin Smith, far from being a weak imitation of another character, is actually the biggest Chad in Dead by Daylight. The Sigma male of the survivor cast, not bothering with such tawdry concerns as cosmetics and looking like his actor, because he's on that Sigma male grind set that he's been on all his life. Quentin Smith is just built different. And here's why.
And the things we said he did! The cave? Did you ever find it? Look, I've been on this stuff since I was 15. Okay, it's totally fine. You just go back, you fill it up, and even just a couple, all I need is a couple.
I want to start by talking about Quentin's role in his movie, and for once I don't plan on mincing my words. Quentin carries the main story of Nightmare on Elm Street remake on his shoulders. Like Atlas holding up the world, Quentin supported the weight of the story by driving most of the action and development in the movie's plot. Despite not picking the final girl of the movie, I think behaviour made the right choice in going for Quentin instead, because it allowed them to capitalise on a mistake made by the movie. Nancy Holbrook is a shit character. For those who weren't aware of the movie's backstage drama, Rooney Mara, the actress who played Nancy, absolutely despised working on the film. Her experience on set was so bad that it made her question whether she wanted to be an actress at all. And it kinda shows in her performance. She clearly doesn't want to be there, and if her time on set was that bad, I can't say I blame her. Rooney Mara did go on to have a shining career in acting, with 2 Oscar nominations under her belt, so fortunately she did decide to keep going after the wrap on Nightmare on Elm Street. but that doesn't change the fact that her performance did the character of Nancy a massive disservice. It does not help that she's relegated to a background character for the first half of the movie, because the film tries to be cleverer than it is, and pretends that our final girl is actually going to be Chris, played by Katie Cassidy, who dies about halfway through the movie. The story follows Chris from the diner scene at the very start until her death at the start of the second act, giving us just enough time to attach to Chris before she's killed and replaced with a human blancmange with a personality mouldy potato, played by someone who'd rather just be at home watching the Lego movie. The movie acts like Nancy's a big deal, but she's really not. But with Nancy being so bad, what drives the movie into its conclusion and pushes the conflict with Freddy forward? Enter Quentin Smith. Like Nancy, Quentin only really takes centre stage in the story after the deaths of Chris and her boyfriend Jesse. But unlike Nancy, whose actions are only reactive to Freddy's predations on her, Quentin is a very proactive character who consistently solves the problems that Freddy presents. He's the one taking Zonarol and chugging Red Bulls to keep Freddy at bay, while the others are still coming to terms with what's happening to them. He's the one who researches micronaps. He's the one who discovers the truth behind Freddy's death and confronts his father about his role in it. He's the one who stole the adrenaline from the nurse's cart to keep himself awake, and eventually uses it on Nancy to wake her up and defeat Freddy. Quentin is a Chad because he wants to have a bigger role than the movie will allow him to have. He picks up the narrative slack left by the other flat, turgid characters. Since the only other proactive character in the story, Chris, dies unceremoniously in a pathetic attempt at throwing the audience a red herring, I guarantee you, this movie would have been so much better if Nancy had been the one to die at the start of the third act, and Chris had survived to the end. That would actually have been a really good red herring, breaking up both the couples to give the remaining members a lot more emotional impetus behind their battle against Freddy. Chris would have lost Jesse and Quentin would have lost Nancy. So the movie would have maintained a Dream Warriors-esque vibe of unlikely high school allies banding together to defeat the Dream Demon. And even from the start of the film, Chris was always shown to be fairly proactive as well, just like Quentin. Chris put the pieces together from the pictures at the funeral, and after she dies, that role of the industrious researcher is split partially between Nancy and Quentin. If Chris had stuck around and continued doing her research, it would have made the film's narrative feel less lopsided. When Chris died, Quentin and Nancy just sort of took over where she left off, making her impact and her discoveries feel unimportant. But if Chris had lived, she could have continued her research into the history of the preschool and Freddy's death, while Quentin sticks to the practical, scientific side of sleep and staying awake. It would have given them both clearly defined roles in the story and made their victory against Freddy feel more complete. Again, unlikely allies coming together to be greater than the sum of their parts. It's been done like Elm Street many times, and it would have been a great way to bring the theme back in the remake. Quentin was always meant to be the pit crew of the movie, Nancy's support pillar that allows her to drive the film's conflict with Freddy, but that kind of falls apart when the pit crew is more competent at driving the car than the actual driver. Quentin does all the work of the main hero of the movie without getting attention or the screen time that a main hero should have, because he has to play second fiddle to a bland, flavourless slice of white bread played by someone who doesn't want to be there. When the Nightmare on Elm Street chapter arrived, it was very clear that behaviour was not going to make the same mistake when characterising Quentin through his perks. Vigil, Wake Up and Pharmacy all fit Quentin's role in the movie. He's the support, he's the dependable friend you can rely on to help bail you out. Vigil, I think, does it better than the rest. He literally helps you recover from fatigues and other ailments faster because he's a friend looking out for you. When the trial looks rough ahead and you're exhausted or blind while your teammate's dead, you just remember what the law guy said. Yeah, you've got a friend in him. Wake Up I don't really feel strongly about, but I do like how it stands as a thematic opposition to Remember Me. Freddy wants to keep you ensnared forever, Quentin urges you to wake up and keep moving. And this might confuse you at first, but I think Pharmacy is the reincarnation of Decisive Strike into the best timeline where things are cool and epic and good in the world. because both perks are designed to recreate noteworthy and iconic moments from the movies in the game, and both do it very effectively. Decisive Strike was meant to recreate Laurie Strode fighting back against the boogeyman Michael Myers by stabbing him first with a knitting needle to the neck and then a coat hanger to the eye, to retaliate against her tormentor. And as thematically fitting as that perk was, it was a complete design disaster that had to be reworked beyond recognition to be even remotely fair. Meanwhile, Pharmacy recreates the moment when Quentin steals the adrenaline from the hospital and reflects his resourceful nature as a supporting character to Nancy. And unlike Decisive, it manages to be a fun and decently powerful perk without breaking the game into tiny pieces. A green medkit for a quick heal is quite the godsend when you need it, and lets you bring a toolbox or a flashlight in while having a medkit safe in reserve. And it's done in a way that's fun, fair, and flavourful. It's exactly how perks should be designed. You see, Behaviour realised the opportunity that integrating Quentin into the game instead of Nancy presented them with, because Nancy sucked and Quentin didn't. So they did with him what his own movie refused to do, and let him flourish in his own niche of the dependable support, the pit crew to the other survivors, while still letting him have the spotlight in his own story. But that's not what makes Quentin a Chad, oh no. What makes Quentin a Chad is the lore segment that Behaviour wrote about him to justify and explain his inclusion in the game alongside Freddy. It's genuinely the best lore for a non-original character that Behaviour has ever written, because it actually decides to grow Quentin and Freddy outside of the confines of their movie. Which is good because much of that movie gargles toilet water, but I digress. In DBD's story, they didn't just do a Halloween and simply scoop up the characters just as their movie ended. Instead, the story alludes to a new conflict between Quentin and Freddy in the aftermath of the death of Nancy's mother in the cliffhanger ending. If or how Nancy herself survived her new encounter with Freddy is not discussed, but leaving her out of the picture allows Quentin to take the centre stage that he deserves. We get to root for Quentin independently of Nancy, as he starts to understand and piece together the dream world. A concept that isn't really explored properly in the remake, despite it being core to the original movies. Manipulating the dream world to weaponize it against Freddy was never shown to be particularly effective. Krueger is beaten in the movie not by threatening him in the dream world itself, by pulling him out of it, with the adrenaline Quentin uses to wake up Nancy. I'm glad Quentin's lore used this concept more, since it's a key part of what makes Freddy beatable at all in the original run of movies. Quentin learns about this the hard way, in a gruelling repetition of his borderline torturous sleep deprivation regimen from the original movie. To think of the poor guy nearly driving himself into catatonia, not once but twice to beat Freddy. You see why Quentin's a Chad now, right? Despite the odds stacked against him, Quentin's pursuit of a way to overpower Freddy is relentless, but he doesn't do it for himself. It may take many attempts, but he vowed that somehow he would find a way to beat Freddy once and for all. If he didn't, it would be only a matter of time before Freddy would win and Nancy was lost. Ah, Quentin. Even now as the main character of your story, you're Nancy's support pillar first and foremost. Your girlfriend and your movie did not deserve you. This culminates in a story section that is best understood when you first read Freddy's lore, then Quentin's. Freddy's done playing with his food, and plans on dealing with Quentin right here and right now. But by clever improvisation and knowledge of Freddy's habits, Quentin laid a trap for him by using paint thinner that used sparks from Freddy's claws to ignite him in a blaze. Nevertheless, it would take more than that to beat the Dream Demon, and Quentin soon found himself at Freddy's mercy once again. But what does Quentin, the teenage boy with his back to the wall, do? He doesn't grovel for his life, he doesn't back down, he doesn't beg. He simply focuses all his willpower on banishing Freddy for good. This is a young man barely old enough to drive a car, squaring off against an immortal monster that has terrorised every waking and sleeping moment for weeks on end, whose evil is so great that not even death will accept him. Quentin Smith is effectively staring into the jaws of hell itself, and he doesn't even blink. His only response is to stare back into the abyss, focusing his hatred completely on Freddy, and in doing so, drew the attention of the entity. It's implied that the entity took Quentin first, which brought Freddy along for the ride. Freddy is a demon that was residing in Quentin's mind, so when Quentin got whisked away, it cut Freddy off from the dream world and his other victims. In other words, the entity's intervention saved Nancy Holbrook from Freddy. And that means, for all intents and purposes, Quentin Smith has already won. Because, like the Chad he is, Quentin's not in it for himself. You can see that in the movie and at the start of the story. He's in it for Nancy. And as long as Quentin's in the realm of the entity, Freddy's there too with him, meaning Nancy's safe and that's all that matters to him. Even to the bitter end, Quentin's the pit crew we all want. The movie didn't deserve him, Nancy didn't deserve him, and frankly, I don't think we deserve him either. And how DVD has treated him compared to his own movie, and parent company New Line Cinema, shows the virtues of having horror fans create a horror game. Because this wasn't some cosmic coincidence that the secret protagonist of a crappy movie that didn't utilise Kyle Gallner's performance properly was able to take the spotlight and be realised into the game so well. Despite the many gameplay problems that it caused, way too much care was taken with the flavour and style of the chapter to let the potential for Quentin's character slip through behaviour's fingers. Actual humans at behaviour watched that movie, thought to themselves, Quentin's kinda cool, I wish I got to see more of him. And then made it so that we see more of him. Much more of him than the actual movie itself chose to show us. And it's things like this, bones thrown to hidden gems and old, underappreciated characters and franchises that keep licenses alive. Hellraiser is a 30-year-old franchise that arguably hasn't had a good movie since the second one. And yet it made it to number 11 on Twitter's trending page when the Hellraiser DLC was announced. And Konami basically taking Silent Hill down behind the shed and shooting it has allowed behaviour to recapture the magic of the original Team Silent lineup of games, and bring them to a new audience who might never have even touched a Silent Hill game before. You don't think a decent part of the audience for the 2018 Halloween remake, or the revival of Saw via Spiral, didn't come in some part from Dead by Daylight's continued cultural awareness of franchises long since departed? Brandon Trush, a writer at Fangoria, interviewed both our own Matthew Cote and Wes Keltner, the head developer on Friday the 13th, the game, God rest its soul, just about this topic. You can read the full interview in the description, but it's Trush's words that sat with me while I was writing this script. The process of adapting licensed IPs results in legitimate and worthy portrayals of these characters that satisfy both new and old fans alike. Games like Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th, the game, innovate these characters in ways that can't be achieved through reboots, prequels, or long-awaited sequels. And the enduring success and fanfare surrounding them proves it. And nowhere is Trush's point proved better than the love Quentin's gotten from the community since he was introduced to our little game. We all know about the reverse chainsaw into Quentin hiding in a corner. We all know that Quentin who spun Scott Jund. We all made jokes about Quentin's face getting reworked for years, only to lose our minds when it actually happened. We might not have noticed it, but this innocuous and underrated character from a shitty remake that no one watched is part of the fabric of our game now. And with the planned sequels, the 2010 remake scrapped and the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise on life support as New Line pushes the Conjuring universe as its horror franchise of choice, maybe Quentin's safer with us anyway. Okay, so that's everything I have to say about the man, the myth, the legend that is Quentin Smith. With the mid-chapter breathing down our necks and Michaela, Trickster and Yunjin lore that will be coming fairly soon, I thought it would be advisable to get this one out of the way now. My thoughts on the mid-chapter as a whole, mostly I really do like it. Plague buffs are particularly interesting, I'll be talking about those potentially another time. But the only thing I'm a little suspect about is boon totems, and a wider issue that Circle of Healing has brought to her about healing times in DBD, but maybe I'll go over those another time as well. Before you go, if you haven't subscribed then please do consider doing so, it helps me out a bunch. And as well as the Brandon Trush interview, in the description you can find links to my Twitter, my Twitch, my Discord server, and my Patreon and Ko-fi links if you are interested in supporting the channel. I've got some very exciting videos and some very interesting news coming in the next few weeks and months, so I cannot wait to get those to you. But until then, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.